Okay, so we are on to day 2 of Wolf Summit, which is a focus particularly on the scale-ups in general. So day 1 was focusing on startups, and we have added a scale-up day to this edition of Wolf Summit. We're very excited today to have this particular panel, which is about pre-IPO capital raising options for Central European-based companies. And this panel has a particular focus on the very deep German capital markets. And I'm very pleased to introduce Oliver Meyer and Falco Weinert, who are from the Deutsche Börse and Deutsche Börse Venture Network, and Adrian Kowolik from East West Capital or East West Research. And I will let each of you please do a bit better introduction of yourselves. Oliver, let's have you start off.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. My name is Oliver, and I'm working for the Deutsche Börse. As Deutsche Börse Group, we are one of the largest capital market infrastructure providers in the world. In addition, we do also invest in startups by our own, together with our corporate VC unit. And moreover, we have an exclusive network for startups and investors called the Deutsche Börse Venture Network. And as a global sales and relationship manager of this pre-IPO initiative, I'm the first point of contact for all international startups and investors, and to support them in their financing needs, general access to investors, or at least on their way towards an IPO on our stock exchange.
Okay, and Falco?
Yeah, so maybe just a few words about myself. My name is Falco Weinert. I'm a colleague of Oliver, and I'm working as a senior manager for Deutsche Börse. In the past years, I was responsible for the IPO business and supported companies in going public at Frankfurt Stock Exchange. And I'm working in our Deutsche Börse Venture Network unit to support Berlin-based growth companies as well as invest.
Great. And Oliver and Falco, you guys are in Frankfurt right now?
I'm in Frankfurt.
Oliver's in Frankfurt and I'm in Berlin. So
okay, great. Adrian, please.
Hello, my name is Adrian Kowolik. I am managing partner of East Value Research, an on-bank research house and consulting firm which is based in Berlin. We focus on bringing together listed and privately held smaller companies from Eastern Europe with Western European investors whom CEE-based institutions usually don't know, especially high net worth individuals, family offices, and VC firms.
Great, and we'll have a more chance to come back to you, Adrian. So let's have a short presentation from Oliver and Deutsche Börse, so kind of setting the scene for the rest of the panel and the overall market. So Oliver, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Don't worry, we do not want to show too many slides today, but as you said, we would like to start with some exciting figures that just support our thesis. First of all, about the European VC landscape in general, and then in addition, let you know about what we are doing to support VC-backed companies in their further growth. So maybe Falco, you just first give us a short update and insight about the VC landscape.
Sure. So thanks, Oliver. Exactly as you say, there are some exciting figures because in the last month, when we analyzed the European VC landscape, we have seen that within the last few years, Europe has emerged as an important venture capital and especially as a significant tech ecosystem. So with some of the most successful venture-backed startup stories coming straight out of Europe. And that is why we as Deutsche Börse explored the interconnected landscape of private and public tech companies and capital flows in the DACH region and in Europe. And on this slide, you can see the largest European deals in the last year. And moreover, what you can see is that European VC investments reached near record levels in 2020, despite challenging macro conditions. So, as investors bet on pandemic accelerated digital adoption. And when we are speaking about Europe, this does also include one of the hottest places to be, of course, so the CEE region. So, for example, the VC investments year to date in 2021 are as high as the whole 2020 VC investments in CEE. So that's quite exciting. And yeah, exactly. And when you are looking at the next slide, what we also can see is that public and private investors seek exposure to early stage companies. So it means that that private and public investor groups are becoming more interlinked. Respectively, it means that certain investor groups increase their asset allocation to private equity and venture capital. And so we have more VC rounds with PE participation. We have more crossover investment. And as you can see on the middle chart, we have, as you can see on the middle chart, and in addition, we have more family offices doing direct fund investments to PE and let's see on the right side. And of course, we want to be honest. There are many positive developments, but also still some difficulties. So we have this evaluation, unfortunately, only for DACH region, not for CEE. But the important point is to understand that late stage growth highly dependent on non-European financing. I think that's not a new fact, but it's also a current fact. So over the past 20 years, up to 63% of the VC funding volume for European unicorns was backed by non-European funds. So especially for larger financing rounds, European companies rely on money from abroad, and that means, especially I would say from Series B onwards, it's usually important to have access to investors from all over the world and not only a domestic investor network, because it is hard to find enough suitable investors in the region or within Europe as a whole. And that's one of the main reasons we as Deutsche Börse established our venture network. And maybe Oliver, you will let us a little bit know more about our initiative, venture network.
Yeah, thanks, Falco. First of all, it is important to understand that we as Deutsche Börse are an international marketplace organizer for the trading of shares and securities. So we do also act as a transaction services provider, giving companies as well as investors access to global capital markets. Beside this, we do operate the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, which is one of the world's largest trading centers for securities and very prominent for its trading room, where all the major IPO events take place and are broadcasted all over the world. But we, and you especially as an audience, we all know how steep, stony, and difficult this path towards the ultimate capital markets could be for young aspiring companies. And this is why we recognize that we do need to tear down these barriers, not only towards an IPO, but also when it comes to venture companies and their access to international investors pre-IPO, long before they do even think to go public one day. So we started the Deutsche Börse Venture Network 5 years ago to create a strong ecosystem for growth in Europe. It is designed to make a noticeable difference in the financing situation for young aspiring companies, for founders, but also for investors. We are focusing our expertise in the pre-IPO area in order to support innovations with a potential long-term impact on growth and prosperity in Germany and whole Europe. So every growth path is unique. You know this better than myself. And this is why we are focusing on 3 pillars to prepare startup and growth companies best for the capital raising processes: capital, network, and skill. Because from our point of view, these are the most important cornerstones for a company to grow quickly and establish a sustainable business. The term capital on the left-hand side indicates that based on individual financing needs and strategy, the company is matched with the right investor, may it be venture capital, private equity, family office, ultra high net worth individual, or even corporate VC. Nevertheless, the network is key. So companies do not only need access to capital, but also to other stakeholders like peers, lawyers, capital market experts, politics, and many more. So, for example, we do also partner with international top conferences like Wolf Summit, where members get free tickets and the opportunity to pitch on the relevant stages in front of relevant audience. And last but not least, the founder and the management benefit from shared know-how in growth financing, growth management, and capital market readiness in order to take the right decisions for the right time. Where do we stand today? The network has established itself among growth companies as well as venture capitalists, private equity, family office, high net worth individuals, and other stakeholders. So we do believe that it does need this large-scale effort to strengthen and expand the venture capital financing in Europe. Today, the community consists of more than 660 members from all over Europe and the world, and with more than 200 companies from early to later and pre-IPO stage, we do cover all industries, right? From fintech, e-commerce, biotech, and other tech industries. The investors on the other side, on the right-hand side, they are also international and pretty diverse regarding their investment strategy and philosophies. So far, 9 IPOs have been generated out of this network, and we have seen more than 30 other company exits like trade sale, M&A, and so on. All member companies have raised more than 4.6 billion euros so far. In the beginning, we heard from Falco that international investor access is an important aspect for European startup and growth companies, not only because international investors might have deeper pockets like the local ones, right? It is also about smart money, sharing experiences, networks, or best practices, and other support a great VC might provide you as a startup. So therefore, we do believe that it needs an international and diverse investor base that could be approached by startup and growth companies with various needs and demands. The investor community from the venture network consists of renowned institutional and professional early to late stage investors from all over the world, and with multiple investment strategies, philosophies, and mindsets. So at the end of the day, startups, they benefit from the targeted matchmaking process, investors from the high quality deal flow, and the stock exchange at the end of the day maybe benefit from an IPO of a well-positioned and much better informed company. So if you as a company are thinking of getting access to new liquidity with the help of a strong network behind, or if you are even a later stage and thinking of an IPO and tapping even deeper capital markets, please feel free to contact us, right? It is not only a matter of time or the choice for listing venue, maybe Warsaw, London, New York, Frankfurt, whatever, when it comes to different alternative raising options. There are many, many other reasons and rationales for companies who decide to go public. There's no typical IPO candidate for us. We collected some of these reasons and rationales as an excerpt from a world full of possibilities. And you all know, or we all know, that it is proven fact that global champions emerge from capital markets. As a result of our strong growth ambitions in Europe and also the will to master the digital transformations, we definitely do need the access to deep capital markets. The financing from deep liquidity pools and indices in which international asset managers invest more and more money is obvious, right? So an IPO and a listing are stages for visibility and presence towards all your major and most important stakeholders. So nevertheless, this should not really hide the fact that from our point of view, it is most important to connect with the right financial intermediaries or partners beforehand and discuss these questions and perspectives as soon as they get relevant for you as a company. So these partners or contacts could be your bank, lawyer, investor, somebody like Adrian from East Value Research, a stock exchange, or someone else you trust in, right? And it is the same like building a house. One of the most fundamental step is the planning and the preparation, and to have the right partners on board just from the beginning. So, Falco, over to you for the very end of our short presentation.
Yeah, like you said, Oliver, so this is the end of the official presentation, so let's get more informal and discuss now. We hope you could take away some key facts out of the presentation, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions afterwards. But for now, I think the other speakers will certainly have something more to say about the topic, raising options for CEE-based companies. So I'm handing over to you, Tom and Adrian.
Yeah, I've got just one or two quick questions, and I want to hear a bit from Adrian as well. In terms of the Deutsche Börse Venture Network, if I'm a company in Central Europe, you're looking to raise capital, I'll reach out to you or to Falco and to get more details, but give me an idea of the scale of the pricing. Is it expensive to join the network? Is it not expensive? Is it an annual membership and plug into some events? I mean, give us a bit more of that.
Yeah, the venture network, there is a contribution fee for the membership. The companies pay an annual fee ranging from 1,000 to 5,000 euros for 12 months, but then they can decide what kind of services they want to use, right? From the three pillars, the capital network or the skill, and this is just an annual package, and then they can decide and choose. Okay, well, that's a cheap entry price to tag in to connect to 400 investors in your network. Okay, great. Falco?
Exactly. And just let me add one sentence, because the investors are for free. So if you want to join the network as an institutional, professional investor, then you can join without a fee.
Okay. I do have some more questions we'll come back to in a second, but Adrian, can you tell us a bit more about what you're doing? I know you've had a big success and focus on introducing Polish companies, particularly to German private capital and family funds, but if you would give us a bit more insight into what you're doing, what is your niche, as well as any examples of successes that you can tell us about.
Yes, our main focus is on bringing CEE-based companies with Western European, especially German-speaking investors, but we also connect German companies with Eastern European investors. So we are a kind of bridge maker. I think I am well positioned to do it because I was born in Poland, but I have been living in Germany for many years. So this helps a lot. I would maybe say something about the difference between Western investors and CEE-based investors. In my opinion, because of the maturity of the Western markets, Western European investors usually know the respective industry, for example, the biotech sector, much better than CE-based ones, and also have a wide international network. They also often support the respective companies, not just financially, but also operationally. I believe a good example is one of my company's biggest success stories so far, the telemedicine company Nestmedic, to which we introduced a well-known German family office. And this family office not just committed a significant amount of capital to this startup, but also helps it to develop its business further. For example, with regard to market entry in the US.
Okay. And so the niche that you're targeting from a capital raise perspective is, give us a size of the scale, millions of euros. What is your sweet spot, so to speak?
So our Western European investors typically invest between 100,000 euros up to 10 million euros.
Okay. Good. Going back to DB Venture Network for a moment, Oliver and Falco, could you also give us one or two examples of, let's say, smallish companies that have plugged into your network or your capital, your investor network, and kind of tell us a story of how someone's benefited from that and grown with those three pillars you mentioned, which is the capital, the network, and the skills. We'd love to hear one or two examples.
Okay, maybe I should start, and Falco, you can add something if you want. There was a e-commerce shop for pet accessories, and they decided to go with us to Monaco, right, to pitch in front of investors. They were in search of money and current fundraising process. That they found the right family office there in Monaco, right? An elder woman who just sold her pet or their pet food factory and basically knew the business, right? The pet business. And these guys received a lot of money from her. They've grown a lot since then. They also participated in one or two trainings, right, to gain some know-how for the further growth. And nowadays, they are also participating in our Challenger Company workshops. These are the dedicated workshops for pre-IPO companies to prepare them for the next IPO processes and to discuss the steps and the challenges they are facing. And as I said, this e-commerce company, they joined the Venture Network, I think, 3 years ago, and now are really ready to enter the capital markets. We cannot say that they found all investors with our network, but we can definitely say that we've laid some fundaments in order to help them to take the right decisions. Other more prominent IPOs were, for example, Delivery Hero or HelloFresh, that were part of our network before, and then decided to go public in Frankfurt and not New York or London or whatever. So these are very prominent success stories from our network.
And just to add something, Oliver, because that's a good point. And if we see that that European exchanges, stock exchanges, are the preferred venues for European tech listings, and for example, in the last year, nearly 90% of public German tech companies choose a domestic IPO. So in Germany, it makes sense to offer events that are supporting domestic companies in reaching out to international investors, because this is important for the company as well as for us, because we hope that the companies will grow. But I think it's for every country the same. Yeah, you have to think international when you want to reach out to investors, and not only to local, because then you are very limited in your investor access.
Okay.
What I think is very nice about the Deutsche Börse Venture Network is that you do not force the companies which become members of your network to conduct the IPO in Frankfurt, but you let them decide whether, for example, they go to Amsterdam or New York. This is positive because for certain sectors, like for example, the biotech sector, yeah, Frankfurt is not necessarily the best stock exchange in Europe. As far as I know, Amsterdam is much better.
Yeah.
So also the IPO itself is not the right exit option for every company. Yeah. So like Oliver said in the beginning, yeah, we had 9 IPOs from the venture network, and the venture network started in 2015. So we have more than 200 companies in the venture network right now. So yeah, you know it by your own, yeah. So the typical exit option could be another one than an IPO, especially if the companies are quite small, and M&A deals and whatever are more typical than an IPO. So yeah.
It is also a question of the industry, right, Adrian? We all know that biotech is a difficult industry and business, especially here in Europe, and we are pretty aware of this, and we also already lost IPOs to New York or London or Amsterdam or Paris, but no problem for us. We want the right IPOs from the right companies for the right investors, pre and post IPO. What we see now is the pipeline is filled, right? The IPO pipeline is filled, especially for this year. We calculate with at least 10 IPOs in Frankfurt. Major industries today are e-commerce, tech, telco, healthcare, all these COVID or post-COVID winners, right? And these guys, all these e-commerce guys, for example, that I just described, they're desperately looking for funding, right? Because they need to expand, they need to grow their business, and these funds, they can only get these funds via the capital markets today. And nowadays, we see also a lot of demands, not only from institutional investor side, but also from retail investor side. So the IPO business is definitely a very exciting business nowadays.
Yeah. And Adrian, jumping to you about that same topic in terms of interests that you see from investors. I mean, I think that you've worked with a lot of kind of traditional industries, manufacturing, production, family offices from that space. Do you see some shifting of their appetite for new types of deals in light of COVID and the e-commerce boom? Just tell us a bit more of how you see the investor appetite shifting in the last 12 months.
Let me answer your question in that way. I see really much bigger interest in Polish and Eastern European assets, stocks, and companies, privately held companies, than 2019. I believe the reason is that first of all, the amount of capital which is available on the market due to the policy of the central banks. And secondly, it's nowadays much easier for Western European investors to buy stocks on the Warsaw Stock Exchange. So you have much better possibilities to buy shares on the Warsaw Stock Exchange, or also in, I don't know, Hungary, Czech Republic, through discount brokers, or the so-called neo brokers, than 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Okay. And the sectors, are anything unusual that you might have come across? I mean, we know e-commerce is hot. We know anything health related is hot. Anything else that might be something we haven't thought about, sectors, or things that are underappreciated that may be opportunities in?
A very interesting sector in Poland is, for example, software. Polish software developers are it's everybody knows that the quality of the work is very good. But when it comes to other industries, there are many companies from traditional industries which are very attractively valued nowadays.
Yeah, I would think there'd be.
And what I'm also seeing is that in contrast to I don't know 5-10 years ago, the smaller companies in Eastern Europe have nowadays a much stronger focus on international markets. Even the smallest companies try to enter markets outside of their home country as soon as possible.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Oliver or Falco, comments on that at all?
Definitely agree. Yeah.
And in terms of, again, going back to old industries, let's say manufacturing, traditional bricks and mortar industries, do you see some of those companies feeling an urgency to digitalize, to become more digital, to become more nimble, to be more e-commerce focused? And is that a growth area as well for you, Adrian or Oliver? Have you seen that?
Yes, this is a general trend. I mean, the COVID pandemic has accelerated this trend towards digitalization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe to add, investors or customers also, they are more focusing on sustainability, corporate governance, and not only on digitization. So these are another challenges companies are faced with.
Yeah, Falco.
Yeah, so maybe I want to bring it to a little bit higher level, because what we can first
Always good. Higher level is always good.
because I think there's one important point, because what we can see is that a positively reinforcing snowball effect is underway, is especially in the DACH region, but also in Europe in general, where much larger new cohort of rising stars is emerged. This fueled by the talent and capital of the past ecosystem success. Yeah, so we have seen some unicorns in the last years, like Zalando, Delivery Hero, and so on. They are very fast growing, and they are leading this snowball effect. And you're right. So the sectors are e-commerce, are tech, and so maybe a little bit that's why that's why during this snowball effect, especially these sectors are supported maybe a little more than others. And a second thing, I saw just in the last weeks a number. It was that the seed-funded European startups can just likely reach unicorn startups like their USPs. So around 1% of European seed-funded companies achieves $1 billion plus valuation.
1%. Okay.
I said it was 1.2. Okay. 1.2. So yeah. So I found it was a very, very interesting number because we often have the feeling that it is a must to go, for example, to the US or to go out of Europe to have success. And I think sometimes it's a better way to search inside Europe, not too local, not only inside your country, but to search inside Europe for the right investors.
Mm-hmm. And Oliver, you touched on corporate governance, and I want to hear a bit about that with your investor network and Adrian as well. You typically have, I think, very strong corporate governance and financial statements in Western Europe, and it's probably a little bit weaker in Eastern Europe, let's say. But I'm curious if you all have seen examples of that, or do you feel from your investors, your family offices, for example, that they insist on pulling up those standards a bit higher to meet a Western European standard? I think that's a good thing for companies in Central Europe who might feel an obligation to pull up a little bit their corporate governance and the integrity and the reliability of their financial statements. But I'm curious if you've seen that, Adrian, in some of your dealings.
Yeah, when it comes to corporate governance, then I would say that if I look at the overall market, at the average company in Poland, this is unfortunately still a weak point. So there is a lot of room for improvement, given the fact that investors worldwide have been putting an increased focus on corporate governance and things like this.
Yeah. Oliver, you're shaking your head as if you've got something to say.
Yeah, investors, I definitely agree that investors are looking more or focusing more on ESG criteria, right? Sustainable investment solutions and so on and so on. And I would advise companies to definitely have a look at this because these are getting more and more relevant to investors, the public, the customers, as I said. This is a hot topic, yeah.
Okay. Shifting for a second, let's imagine that we are running a Central European company, I don't know, Poland or Romania, whatever it may be, and thinking about Warsaw Stock Exchange, Budapest, Bucharest Stock Exchange, some other options. This is a bold, obvious question to you guys, Deutsche Börse, but why would they go to you instead of the Warsaw Stock Exchange or the Bucharest Stock Exchange? Just give me a little bit more of insight into
that. From my perspective, from my personal perspective, not company perspective, Europe is still too fragmented. May it be in economic reasons or political reasons, and I don't know how many stock exchanges we have in Europe, but I think local companies would first target their own local stock exchanges when they go public. I would not say that any Polish company would first, when it decide to go public, their first decision would be to go to Frankfurt to raise money. They would first go to the Warsaw Stock Exchange, right, and then maybe think about a second listing or dual listing in Frankfurt just to target other financial markets and investor money. Nevertheless, Frankfurt is one of the top 10 major financial centers in the world. And we as Deutsche Börse, for example, we have whatever market participants all over the world, and our business is very, very diversified. We offer, as we just presented, pre-IPO initiatives and services, road to IPO services, and so on and so on. I would definitely say that also because of Brexit and other macroeconomic challenges, Frankfurt as a major financial center is also profiting a lot from these developments. And but as I said, the road to IPO is too individual. We cannot say, okay, please go to Frankfurt, please go to this and that listing venue. It's definitely an individual decision, discussion we need to take first to help the company to take the right decision. And we are talking to many companies from CEE that are already listed on CEE stock exchanges that now want to get listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange for dual listing. No problem. Yeah.
Okay. And I didn't ask the same question to you, Oliver or Falco, that I asked of Adrian in terms of the sweet spot in terms of investment. Adrian had a 100,000 to 10 million euro, so pretty small to start with, at least. What is the range if a company is interested to tap into your venture network? What kind of advice do you have in terms of size of a deal, ticket size?
I think the smaller investors within our network are investing tickets, I would say, up from the beginning of 1 million. And the biggest one have the possibility to invest up to 200 million per ticket. So it's quite a very wide range. But on the other hand side, when we are talking to companies, what we often say is maybe it's too early to come into the network if you are too small, because there should be a fit between investor and your company. And so most it makes sense if you have 1 million or more revenues per year. If you have maybe you have a first lead investor, there should be a little bit track record to also address other investors and to tell them you are a very hot company. Please be aware of the company.
A ticket size of 1 million or maybe 2 million is perfect for Eastern European startups, in my opinion, because locally they are able to gain or acquire business angels and some EU money, but they are not able to bridge the gap between the seed round and Series A. So, seed is maybe up to 1 million, and Series A is is 5 million euros and more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And coming back to the choice of the stock exchange, the main reason why, in my opinion, Eastern European companies should consider a listing on a stock exchange like Frankfurt or Amsterdam is simply that they would get a much higher valuation there, because in Amsterdam or in Frankfurt, investors from all around the world are active. And these investors are, on average, much better educated than the average investor in Eastern Europe. They are much better able to value innovative business models.
That was going to be my next question, is the valuation gap between, let's say, an East European capital raise for a small company. If they're raising €1 million, they might get a 100% better valuation in a German capital market than they would in East European, for the most part. Would that be a fair judgment?
I give you an example. There's currently an ongoing IPO in Poland of a, in my opinion, very innovative biotech company. And I believe that this company would get 6, 7, 8 times higher valuation on a Western stock exchange than in Poland.
Wow, that's a big number. I think that Oliver needs to pick up the phone and call those guys, I believe.
And of course, the visibility of the company would be much higher. So they would be able to gain, for example, partners from the big pharma industry much easier.
Interesting. And Oliver,
because unfortunately, the Warsaw Stock Exchange and other Eastern European stock exchanges are still niche markets.
Oliver, thoughts on the valuation gap between Germany and Central East Europe?
Yeah, it also depends on the network that we could provide pre-IPO. I just presented our services in the pre-IPO area, where in startups or pre-IPO companies do not only need access to capital or investors, but also to other market participants, right? So this is why we in Frankfurt offer, for example, so-called banking roadshows. So we take startups who decided to go public within the next, 12 to 24 months, to investment banks to challenge their equity and IPO story with them. We have these banks in Frankfurt, especially after the Brexit. Lots of investment banks moved to Frankfurt, and we are able to directly connect these companies with the investment banks with up to 5 meetings a day, where they get in direct contact with them, and also with advisors, lawyers, and so on and so on. This is also part of the ecosystem, and maybe also part of the valuation. I do not know the exact figures for CE, but on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, Falco, please correct me if I'm wrong, the market cap is the minimum of 100 million euros, right? When a company is going public.
That's what the banks are often saying. What the banks often say. So what you can do is you can go public as standard and general standard from up to 1.25 million market cap. It doesn't make sense, I would say personally, yeah. But it's also possible to do an IPO with a lower market.
Let me ask one question more for Oliver, and then next question to Adrian. First of all, for Oliver, you mentioned the great example of the Monaco deal. Do you have many Asian investors in your network? I'm curious, so that would be an interesting thing. And then the follow-up question to Adrian would be on M&A side. I'm curious about the M&A activity between Central Europe and Germany, where the potential exists. I'm curious if you've seen it, of Central European companies buying German companies. So other direction. Have you seen some of that? But first, Oliver, if you would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, regarding Asian investors, I would say that we are currently getting higher demand, especially from Asian, but also from Anglo-American investors, because their startups on their local markets are highly overpriced, I would say, right? There are no more relevant and interesting investment opportunities for the investors. So investors, especially from Americas or Asia, they seek access to fairly priced startups, especially in continental and maybe also Eastern Europe, right? And this is why we went to China 2 years ago to take, I think, 10 startups with us and did a roadshow throughout Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, and presented startups from our network to local Chinese investors. There are other political reasons why Chinese investors are maybe not allowed to invest in companies abroad, but what we saw is that there's a high demand from Chinese investors, especially for biotech companies, right? I do not know. I think fintech, Chinese, they are so digitized and know all fintech solutions. What we have also, there's a high appetite, especially for biotech and healthcare companies, and this is the demand we get currently from Asia, especially China.
Okay, Adrian, on the M&A side, I'm curious your thoughts on that.
As you probably know, Germany is Poland's largest trade partner, with more than 28% of Polish exports goes to Germany. And there's a lot of course, German M&A activity in Poland. I believe currently in the area of real estate, but also an increasing number of Polish companies is trying to buy or, for example, establish joint ventures with German companies. A prominent example of a joint venture is the joint venture between Asseco Poland, the largest Polish IT company, and German Adecco.
Okay, all right. We've got about 5 minutes left. Falco, are you speaking? You might look like you might be having something to say, but we have about 5 minutes left.
I only need one, because I had one thought regarding the M&A question, because I really think it's important to see how big your company is and how many money you want to raise. So, because contrary to popular belief, is that European startups are most likely to be acquired by European buyers. So I think in 2020, nearly 70% of all M&A deals in Europe, for all the M&A deals, it was that case. So when I talk about M&A, maybe other exit routes are a little bit different. Like I said at the beginning, for the VC funding volume for European unicorns was backed by non-European funds. So it means if you are on a very high level, you want to raise a lot of money, you are nearly the unicorn club. Yeah, think out of Europe. And if you are very in the beginning and you only need, I don't know, 100,000, you can also look more local, and most of you are in between. So look inside Europe, because that's because it worked quite well in last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're getting a few comments in the chat that people are certainly agreeing with the valuation gap, including from Colin Brown, who's based in Gdańsk, and he's advising American and Finnish companies, and he's saying the same thing. He's seeing the same sort of valuation gaps as well. Niches. Let's talk about one niche, gaming sector. I want to talk about that a bit. Is that something that you see interest in, Adrian, from your side, or Oliver? It's certainly exploding across Central Eastern Europe. And then I want to have a final comments from you all in the more Eastern markets, let's say of Ukraine, of Russia. Is there opportunities there, and is that on your radar screen?
Gaming is definitely very, very strong in Poland. As far as I know, only the Japanese stock exchange has more gaming companies than the Warsaw Stock Exchange.
Actually, I'll correct you there, Adrian. Warsaw passed them last year.
So it's even more than in Japan. So for investors, gaming is a very promising area because it's the probably the fastest growing area of the in the media sector. In Poland, the know-how or the knowledge about the sector is very strong. There is a lot of interest for the sector from both retail and institutional investors. So yeah, it definitely makes sense for Western investors to look at the Polish market also in the area of startups when they like the gaming sector.
Okay, and Oliver, from your perspective, have you seen some interest and appetite for that space?
I must admit that we are pretty envious about your highly developed gaming sector or industry. I must say I could not really see a trend here in Germany, Falco. Maybe you have another experience, but I do not see any trend from company side. We are definitely observing the trends in CEE. But when we are talking about potential IPO candidates from gaming, I'm not sure if they would first go to Frankfurt or choose for Frankfurt as a listing venue.
Okay. And comments on Ukraine. Sorry, go ahead, Adrian.
The big advantage of Poland when it comes to the gaming sector is that the sector is strongly supported by states.
So let me shift gear. We got 2 minutes left, and last comments about Ukraine and let's say more frontier markets, maybe beyond those like Ukraine. But give us an opinion of what you might see from Russia, Ukraine, what other more Eastern markets than just Central Europe. Oliver?
Yeah, it depends also on there are different accounting systems and so on and so on. I do not see any demand from Russia, maybe more from, as you just said, Bulgaria, Ukraine, and so on. These guys heading more for continental Europe. They are very, very great and good and highly developed companies. And maybe this is also a reason for your highly developed gaming industry. The skills of the people there is exorbitant, right? And these guys are now there are some of them heading towards continental Europe, but I cannot really derive a trend from this.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because Rafael's given me the cue that we're out of time. Let me just say thanks, Adrian, very much. Falco, Oliver, Deutsche Börse, Venture Network. Certainly the German market is deep in terms of the capital accessibility for Central European companies. Hope to hear more from you guys. And I think we'll see you back in October at the next Wolf Summit as well. Thank you guys very, very much for your time today. And I would encourage you to drop into the one-on-one meetings sometimes. I'm sure there are people in this platform who want to speak with you directly, and you can pop into that top right of the hop-in where you'll see a little button that says someone wants to talk to you. They can search for you, you can search for them, but I would encourage you to take a few minutes to do that as well. Thank you all very much, and we're out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So that was the first presentation of today. I hope you're enjoying the second day of Wolf Summit so far. And before we get to the next presentation, I would like to remind you about two very interesting features of this online event. We have Expo, virtual expo zone, so you can visit our investors and startups and corporations to talk in a virtual booth. You can join and have a chat, have a conversation with them, so I highly recommend it. Also, we have the networking, and remember that if you have access to Wolf's Match, you can book your meetings today and tomorrow to find your funding opportunities or potential business partners. And now we're getting straight to another presentation by Robin Waters, the founding editor of Tech EU. And the title of the presentation is Scaling Up in the CEE Region, Data and Insights from Tech EU. So without further ado, let's go straight to the presentation.
Hey everyone, good morning. I'm assuming it's morning where you are. It could be afternoon or evening as well. But very warm welcome to the Wolf Summit main stage. My name is Robin Waters from Tech.eu, and I'm here to do a presentation on CEE-based innovation and scale-ups, which I'm really, really happy about because for the last 15 years, I've been writing about technology, specifically in Europe. And for a long time, I've been saying that the CEE region is ripe for innovation and ripe for disruption, and that a lot of great companies will be coming from there. So I'm very pleased to welcome you here for the presentation that I'm about to do. We are calling it Scaling Up in the CEE region. We're going to combine some data with insights that we've gained from years of collecting data on the European tech ecosystem. First, a little bit something about TechEU itself. We are a media/market intelligence company, so we want to be the source of European technology news, data, and market intelligence for the rest of the world, and be a one-stop shop. I'm not going to dwell on this too long to get to the good part, so don't worry. But very roughly, this is what we offer. We're not just a media company, but we also offer market intelligence. We do advertising campaigns with clients. We help curate events, which we're also doing for the Wolf Summit later today. And we also get involved in EU projects sometimes. So that's just a brief intro about TechEU. Let's get to the good part, which is the presentation, of course. The research that we did was on scale-ups in the CEE region. And whenever you do research like that, it's very important to define both of these things at the same time. What is a scale-up, and what do you actually consider to be part of the CEE region? So to answer the second question, when we look at the CEE region, which is, it has multiple definitions from different angles, but we take a very broad view on what Central Eastern European countries actually mean, what they're comprised of. So we went very broad in terms of geography. Just so you know, when we look at scale-ups, this is also a definition that's different depending on who you ask. But for us, when we looked at the data, we made a distinction between companies that have raised more than 15 million euros in their lifetime compared to those who have not, or at least not yet. So that's sort of the cutoff point that we used, 15 million euros, CEE region, and that's the basis of the research that I'm presenting today. So first of all, there are a number of notable scale-ups in CEE. Considering the topic of this conference and the audience, I'm sure you will recognize a lot of these names. But just so you know, they are coming from all over the place, whether it's Slovakia or Czech Republic, Estonia, of course, and Poland. There are a number of really category-leading companies coming from all over the region, which is very, very great to see. So in the research, bear in mind, $50 million or plus 50 million euros raised or more, in the CE region. We've counted about 84 companies that fit those criteria. Interestingly enough, Estonia doesn't come out on top in terms of the number of companies, at least. That is actually Poland. But of course, Estonia always scores very high on these charts as well. Interestingly, Czech Republic, another Baltic country, Lithuania, and Ukraine rounding out the top 5. From those 84 scale-ups, we know that they have raised 13 billion euros since we started doing the research, which is roughly 2014, 2015. So if you go back even further, then of course the number will be higher. But based on the data that we have collected over the last few years, we know that CEE scale-ups have raised more than 13 billion euros so far. Just to put that in perspective, though, we have about 43 billion euros going to European tech startups in 2020 alone. So last year, roughly 3 times as much funding went to European startups and scale-ups in general. So these are, interestingly, 8 billion of that 13 billion euros have actually been raised by only 5 companies. I'm sure the names will also be very recognizable to you. In Poland, we had InPost and Allegro. Both of them IPO'd and raised quite substantial amounts in those stock exchange entries when they did their flotations, one in 2021, so very recently, and one last year. But those are the number 2 scale-ups in terms of funding raised, even though it was through an IPO. And then we have, of course, the Romanian unicorn UiPath. We have TransferWise, now called Wise, from Estonia, and ForFinance from Latvia. So interestingly, also from 4 different countries. So when you look at the scale-up funding per country, you can see that Poland also comes out on top because of the aforementioned reasons, because of those 2 companies, Allegro and InPost, really raising record amounts in their IPOs. Roughly 6.4 billion euros went to Polish companies, compared to 1.9 for Estonia and 1.8 for Romania, so roughly on par, but mostly thanks to UiPath and TransferWise, of course. But those are the companies, those are the countries in the top 3, rounded out by the Czech Republic, helped by Rolik, of course, and Latvia as the 5th. Keep in mind, this is only the scale-ups that were the 84 companies that I mentioned in the beginning. So when you look at the number of rounds of more than 15 million euros in the CEE region, and you look at the number of rounds tracked from 2018 to 2020, you can see that there is a nice going up and to the right from 6 to 10 to 14. However, interestingly, this year seems to be a really breakout year. So we're expecting quite record numbers for scale-up funding in the CEE. And this is also already being reflected in the numbers for the first quarter. So you can see that the first quarter of this year, bear in mind that this quarter is not even over yet. So we're not there yet. But you can already see that the number of 15 million plus euro rounds is already on par with the total in 2019. So you can see that that there's really an acceleration in terms of funding rounds going on when it comes to scale-ups in CEE region. Looked at this differently, looking at the total funding size, the chart looks pretty much the same. Roughly as much funding raised by scale-ups in the CEE region in the first quarter of this year, which again is not over yet, as in 2019. And 2020 was good for almost 1.5 billion euros raised. So keep in mind, this is the 84 scale-ups that we defined in our research. So now this is not the total funding for startups as well. So this is another view looking at how extraordinary the first quarter of this year has already been. UiPath is, of course, an outlier with their $700 million round. Rolik was also an outlier in the Czech Republic, online grocery, online supermarket store, which has raised quite a substantial amount of funding as well. In Croatia, we have Rematch, we have Booksy in Poland, Skeleton Technologies in Estonia. So you can see that these scale-up funding rounds are also happening across the board when it comes to geography. We are looking at a different source now, so this is not necessarily our data. This is Invest Europe, previously called the European Venture Capital Association. So they release numbers every year for how much funding actually flows into certain regions. They gave a focus to CEE region. Unfortunately, they always stop a year behind with the data. So they only have data leading up to full year 2019. But even in their data, you can see pretty much the same phenomenon. Lots of funding, lots of growth, and especially on the later stage, the really big monster rounds that we kept on seeing in Europe in the last 5 years have now finally come to the CEE region as well. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of that in the coming months. So looked at it differently, back to our data, is the VC funding in Central and Eastern Europe by stage. And there you can see that 2019 was really a breakout year. It was really a standout year when you compare it to 2018. 2020 was also quite extraordinary when you look at the total, which was almost 1.5 billion euros. But interestingly, when you look at the scale-up funding specifically, it was almost on par, almost the same as 2019, which I think is a very interesting observation. But again, we can already see by the numbers we've collected and monitored and vetted for the first quarter of 2021 that this is likely going to be a breakout year for the CEE region. I'll be very interested in revisiting this next year at the Wolf Summit to see how those numbers stack up for this year. So this is also another source. This is VestB. They've done an incredible amount of research on the CEE region, so I didn't want to downplay the significance of the help that we got from monitoring their research as well. These are some of the top 100 startups that they've identified. I'm sure you don't necessarily need to read all of those, but this is just to give you an idea that there's also a pipeline of super interesting, scalable, disruptive companies coming out of the CEE region that will very likely graduate almost all of them to scale up stage, which means 15 million euro raised or more. So those should be very interesting to watch. And I will also make sure that you can download this presentation after the session. It's also quite notable that there are a large number of investors looking at the CEE region, trying to find the best companies to invest in. Of course, very local, city-based, national investors looking at local champions, but also regional investors, more and more cross-border investors, investments happening in neighboring countries in the CEE region. And interestingly, of course, we also see quite an uprise in international investors. So investors coming from the US, of course, but also the rest of Europe, Southeast Asia even, looking at the CEE region for interesting companies to invest in. So that will also be an interesting trend to observe in the coming months. When you look at the sectors that are raising scale-up funding in CEE, this is not, by the way, supposed to be a representation in terms of size. So this is just an overview of the typical industries that we noticed have been raising the most amount of funding. So from those 10, that is actually quite visible in the chart, in the visual, sorry, is that the fintech is really the leading category. This is, of course, also the case for the rest of Europe. So it's not that much of a surprise that fintech is also quite a substantial sector when it comes to scale-up funding in CEE region. But interestingly, if you look at Europe, the number 2 are enterprise software, so SaaS companies, and healthcare companies. In the CEE region, that is not the case, or at least not yet. And actually, the number 2 when it comes to industries raising scale-up funding are blockchain companies and e-commerce marketplaces companies, which is not similar to the rest of Europe. So that's quite a notable trend that we observed only for the CEE region. Healthcare is even just barely in the top 10, and you can see that the SaaS companies are also didn't make it even into the top 5. So we'll see if that changes over time, but it's quite noticeable that this is not the case in the rest of Europe. So the CEE is quite different in that regard. It's not just funding, it's also exits. We already mentioned the IPOs of Allegro and InPost. We've identified a number of other exits. Interestingly, 5 out of the 6 that you can find on this chart are IPOs, which is also quite a big difference with the rest of Europe. When scale-ups have a liquidity event or an exit in the rest of Europe, quite typically this is not an IPO. Actually, IPOs are quite rare, even though this is changing quite rapidly already this year. It's quite noticeable that in the CEE region in the last few years, IPOs have been quite a popular means of exit. You can also see that it wasn't just IPOs. Piperife was a big one, of course. They were already unicorn valuation when they got acquired last year by Vista EP, which is a private equity firm. So that was an extremely interesting acquisition and quite a catalyst for innovation in Estonia in the years to come, I would argue. Now let's get to the bad news. When it comes to diversity data, looking at our data, this is where we score enormously poor. And we've actually been helped by research done by other organizations, but you can already see in this chart how bad the situation has gotten in the CEE region. I'll give you some numbers released yesterday, actually, by our friends at Experior Venture Fund and Unconventional Ventures. They've released a report on diversity in the CEE region, and the numbers are quite dismal. So this is quite a depressing statistic, especially compared to the rest of the charts that I've presented, which paint a very positive pictures. So in their research, we've noticed that over the last 5 years, 2.2% of the funding that went to CEE startups only went to all-female teams. If you include the amounts of mixed gender, so male founders combined with a female founder or multiple, that number goes up to 9% when you look at the last 5 years. However, it's very interesting to note and very depressing to note, I would argue, that the progress is actually nowhere. It's not even flat, it's going backwards. In 2020, those numbers were 1% of total investment went to female-only founding teams, and 5% went to mixed female-male founding teams. So those stats are really, really depressing. The same goes for venture funds in itself, because of course this is a result thereof. If you don't have diverse investors, you're never going to have diverse founding teams either. If you look at the funds that are active in the CEE region, only 85% of venture capital investment roles are held by men. If you look at the partner level, that number rises to 93%. So that means only 7% of women working in investment firms have actually reached a partner level rather than associate or VP. So that is a big problem because, as I said, this of course trickles down to where investment goes. Investors tend to sign bigger checks for men, and average round sizes at seed and Series A are also smaller for all women teams in Central Eastern Europe than they are for mixed and all men teams. And why is this a problem? That's because women-founded startups actually outperform male-founded companies for the most part. So they generate more revenue per euro invested, and women-led businesses also, judged by the research from Experian and Conventional Ventures at least, outperform in capital productivity by 96%. So I would know where I would be investing my money if I was a VC in the CEE region. That is all I have for you today. These are my contact details, so you can always contact me to get the presentation, or to if you want to comment or ask questions, feel free to contact me. This is not actually my last slide, because I wanted to point out that in less than an hour, TechEU is very, very proud to curate and host the scale-up stage at the Wolf Summit. So we're going to be talking to a lot of interesting people from the CEE region, a lot of names that you will actually recognize from the presentation. We have the CEO of Prezi, the CMO of Preply in Ukraine. We've got Damir Sabol from Photomath, media representatives, investors from all over Europe, from Speed Invest and Launch Hub Ventures in Bulgaria. So a very, very diverse mix of people that we've gathered for you, and I hope you can join us from noon to 4 p.m. CET. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to see you in person at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, for an interesting introduction of the scale-up stage. So remember that at 12 o'clock, the scale-up stage opens, and there will be 4 hours of insightful panels. And yeah, we're getting to the next point, or actually to the next 2 points of the agenda, because now we will have 2 stages to choose from, British Embassy stage and community stage. So let's start from the first one. On the British Embassy stage, Ventures, Term Sheets, Market Standards and Practices, moderated by Rafał Celej, partner at Kondracki Celej, featuring Charles Thede, Glenn Waters and James Lewis. And on the other side, on the community stage, there's a presentation that I'm really looking forward to by Zoltan Wardi. And the title is The Power of Focus, How to Choose Your Love Your Choice, and Build the Business, Career and Life You Dream About. So like both of the parts are very interesting. Choose the one that you want to watch first, because the recordings will be available later. And remember that the Great Pitch contest is ongoing, so you can also watch the startups competing for the prizes and investment. See you in 40 minutes.